Welcome to Back to the Father, a show about the journey of life focused on our final end, which is God Himself, our loving Father. And now, here's your host, Dave Palmer.
And surprise, surprise, it is not Dave Palmer. You thought Dave Palmer was the host of this program, but I think he's just abandoned it at this point. I don't think he.
I don't know what's up with that.
I think he's done. He saw us last week and he was like, you know what, they did all right.
They did good. Yeah,
Talking
about prayer.
I am going to take another day.
Yeah, there you go.
My name is Sissel Anderson, and I'm the North Texas assistant here at the Guadalupe Radio Network, and I am joined with our wonderful intern, William Kirkendall, who is across from me. He's the one also controlling all the video switching today. We also have our other intern, James, in the other room, who is helping with the board. So it's Sissel and the interns today, which seems to be the common theme. But welcome. Thank you so much for joining Back to the Father. This is a show that was exclusively on our social media sites. And I think, Lord willing, we actually have sound for the first few minutes. We did not last week. This is what happens when Dave leaves, is we have all this technical drama. So we're very excited to be here today. Last week we talked about prayer. That was my decision. I thought, prayer is something I felt confident in. I kind of forgot that Dave was gone for 2 weeks. So I wasn't really thinking of 2 weeks. But then I was like, okay, let's be fair and square. And I let William choose the other topic, since he has a lot of passion about it and gets into frequent arguments or
for like 2 years straight
with his friends. So I think he should have a lot to say about this subject. We'll get into it a little bit more in just a little bit. But first off, William, how are you doing?
Pretty good. We're officially on fall break now, so a little bit more chill. Yeah.
That's super nice. I don't think I ever got a fall break when I was in school.
I guess not all schools do it. I'm the one class I'm taking at Dallas College, an online astronomy course. I don't think I'll have fall break off for that.
I went to Dallas College. They did not do that for us.
I didn't think so. But generally, sometimes the co-op wouldn't have a fall break, or they would have it later. I remember there were 2 years straight. It was probably 2021, 2022 or something like that, both of those years, when we didn't have fall break because either we had it earlier, or I believe there was 1 year when someone got COVID later in the year, so we had a fall break then.
Just a little impromptu fall break.
Yep.
I think it's a more northern thing to have a fall break in the middle of the school year. Like, I think the public schools in the north tend to do that. Because I know my friend's college, Benedictine, in Kansas, not honestly far north per se, but they always have a fall break. And I think it's cool because fall is a really nice time of the year.
Yes, it is.
Not necessarily in Texas, but
I know
not
it's
yet.
more like summer.
Our fall doesn't start until later.
Yeah, like December, whatever.
Right? Our leaves aren't fully on the ground until December. But I hope everyone is having a fantastic Friday so far. I was telling William that I woke up very early this morning because I was like, oh man, this is a big topic. And I was a little bit stressed and chose to decide to de-stress. I was like, let me just go ahead and try coding. And I was doing a free tutorial on how to code a cat quiz. So that was super fun. It is very frustrating. It does not de-stress you, by the way, in case anyone was wondering. But anyhow, again, welcome to the program. The topic today, nice and light one, I think, is monarchy the best form of government? And this is obviously going to be coming from our friend Aquinas, because the show is all about philosophy, particularly comparing other philosophers to the philosophy of Aquinas. And this time, we're kind of going a little bit off because Dave is a really, really big fan of the Summa. He carries the Summa around with him. He knows it very well. He's written about it. But we actually are not going to be referencing the Summa that much today, which, oh no. I feel like we're cheating on the Summa.
To be fair, the Summa doesn't really go into too much depth on the topic.
Exactly.
It mentions it, but there's not too much.
Which is why,
to say in the Summa about it.
When you originally brought this up, William, that you thought this was a good topic idea, I was telling Dave that, and he's like, that's not really in the Summa. And I was like, I did not, but I was going to find out. Like, I hadn't done my research yet. I become an expert in a few hours is basically, well, not expert. I become aware of a subject in a few hours of research. But actually the book that we are referencing, and I linked it in our email that went out just a little while ago, and I can link it hopefully down below here in the comments as well if you want to follow along with us.
Or in the description.
In the description. I'll just copy and paste it here. The book is De Regnum, and the translation of that is On Kingship, which is just the English one. So it's all about government and monarchy, and what works, what doesn't work, what St. Thomas Aquinas has to say about that topic. And I will say, when reading over it, I did feel that even though it is still very Aquinas, so it's very wordy at times, I think it's easier to consume than the Summa is at times.
Probably, yeah.
I don't know if it's the subject matter. I don't know if it's the way he's writing it. I'm not sure, but it's also shorter. So I think you just see that and you're like, oh, it's not like this thick.
Not this huge book, yeah. Exactly.
So we have this. So I linked it if you want to follow along, because we're going to focus on a couple of different aspects and articles that he wrote on. I kind of wrote it in the email, but spoiler, Aquinas does think that monarchy could be like the best form of government.
In principle, he definitely says that.
In principle, he does believe that, but also he goes really into it and talking about kind of some of the pros and cons.
Yes,
which we love that about Aquinas.
Yeah.
And the first one, first off, again, very Aquinas. He wants to start off with what is meant by the word king.
Got to define the terms
Got to define the terms. We got to know what we're talking about. Let's hope that we can define it properly. So this is in chapter 1 of De Regnum. And this is, I don't know if they're called articles here, but I'm going to call it article 3, paragraph 3, something like that. I just took some of the ones that I thought were the best explanations. Also, again, I did make this green, just like last week, my PowerPoint, but when William has it on his computer, it's pink and it's cracking me up. All right. In all things which are ordered towards an end, wherein this or that course may be adopted, some directive principle is needed through which the due end may be reached by the most direct route. A ship, for example, which moves in different directions according to the impulse of changing winds, would never reach its destination were it not brought to port by the skill of the pilot. Now man has an end to which his whole life and all his actions are ordered. For man is an intelligent agent, and it is clearly the part of an intelligent agent to act in view of an end. Men also adopt different methods in proceeding towards the proposed end, as the diversity of men's pursuits and actions clearly indicates. Consequently, man needs some directive principle to guide him towards his end. Now, just right off the bat, I don't think you're going to find many people who write about the idea of different democracies to be writing from the perspective of an end that like Thomas is talking about.
Yeah.
We don't really talk about that. When people are saying, oh, I think this would be the best way to run a country, this would be the best way to run a country, he's very much talking about it's about going towards your end, heaven. Don't think many world leaders in recent years have had that perspective. Or if they have, it's not been in a good way.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, the way our modern society is constructed, so to speak, that's not what it's like anymore. I mean, maybe you could find some good kings in the Middle Ages who had that.
There was like there definitely were some good leaders towards that, but I think you'd be hard pressed today to find many that are concerned about their people's faith and their final destination.
Yeah, not many these days, no.
So that's off the start, very different perspective. Continuing on in paragraph 4, he says, to be sure, the light of reason is placed by nature in every man to guide him in his acts towards his end. Wherefore, if man were intended to live alone, as many animals do, he would require no other guide to his end. Each man would be a king unto himself, under God, the highest king, inasmuch as he would direct himself in his acts by the light of reason given him from on high. Yet it is natural for man, more than for any other animal, to be social and political, and to be a social and political animal, to live in a group. So, do you think you're always drawn to live in a group, William?
I honestly, this has been the most familiar thing I've seen for over the past year, because you can say, because I learned about it all last year. Man being the political animal. I see it all the time in Aristotle's writings and his teachings, and then Aquinas basically agrees with Aristotle in so much, just as much as Augustine agrees with Plato on certain things. But what Augustine and Aquinas do is they bring those two different perspectives of Plato and Aristotle and put them in the divine Christian light to kind of like raise up that philosophy, along with the theology. But essentially, he's agreeing with Aristotle here that we are all born into a society, and then when we come into society, we are political animals living in a group. So it's not about it's not all about individualism as our society sees it today. It's
Yes.
not, what Dave talks about all the time, existentialism. It's not, we shouldn't be putting everything on the individual because
Right.
we are born
Your
in a
truth,
society
you don't wanna
in
get
a
into
groove.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
And that's, it's interesting because this next paragraph that I'm going to read from chapter 1, from what is meant by the word king, it kind of touches on that. And I love it. Aquinas just says it straight. And I feel like a lot of people would be kind of offended by this. It says, moreover, all animals are able to discern by inborn skill what is useful and what is injurious. Even as sheep naturally regards the wolf as his enemy, some animals also recognize by natural skill certain medicinal herbs and other things necessary for their life. Man, on the contrary, has a knowledge of things which are essential for his life only in a general fashion, inasmuch as he is able to attain knowledge of the particular things necessary for human life by reasoning from natural principles. But it is not possible for one man to arrive at the knowledge of these things by his own individual reason. It is therefore necessary for man to live in a multitude so that each one may assist his fellows, and different men may be occupied in seeking by their reason to make different discoveries, one, for example, in medicine, and one this and another in that. So I feel like very independent people will be like, what do you mean I need other people? Yeah. But yeah, it's obvious. I mean, I am someone who I collect hobbies. Like, that is my hobby. I collect hobbies. I love trying new things. I want to know how to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
If I
like coding this morning.
Yeah, exactly. From case in point, I decided I was like, I can be a coder. I always like trying to learn new skills. I've never really mastered one amazingly. So much as I get to a certain level, I'm like, cool, now I know a little bit about this.
Yeah.
And then I like to try something else. But you asked me to operate on someone to save their life, you are in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So it's really reasonable. But I think sometimes people nowadays are like, what do you mean we can't? I can I can do my own thing.
Right.
We don't realize how much we rely on
right.
others.
Because society says it's all
On the
on
self,
us
yeah.
and the individual, but that's not how society has operated for the longest time.
Nope, not at all. And I'm going to conclude with this one last paragraph from chapter 1 saying, if then it is natural for man to live in the society of many, it is necessary that there exists among men some means by which the group may be governed. For where there are many men together, and each one is looking after his own interests, the multitude would be broken up and scattered unless there were also an agency to take care of what appertains to the commonweal. In like manner, the body of a man or any other animal would disintegrate unless there was a general ruling force within the body which washes over the common good of all members. With this in mind, Solomon in Ecclesiastes 4:9 says, where there is no governor, the people shall fall. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I think I feel isn't like, I don't even know if this has actually been a thing that's happened, but the idea is if you drop a bunch of people on an island who have never experienced governing before, they're going to form some form of a bunch of survivers on a shipwrecked on an island.
Yeah,
they're going to come up with some sort
they
of
better,
order.
or else it'd be anarchy.
It's going to go very badly.
Yeah.
Because, you could be like, I'm going to make my own little hut out of the coconut leaves. The other person's like, no. I'm going to go build something out of the papaya trees. And we're all just going to do our own thing. Most likely they're not going to survive very long. Because one, I feel like every single movie about someone being shipwrecked, there's really one smart person who knows all the survival things.
Right.
Maybe that's why I think I need to learn all these things. Coding would not help me, but I want to be that one person who knows a little bit about everything.
Right.
If I'm shipwrecked.
There you go. Yeah.
So pretty straightforward. That kind of defines what we mean by the word king. He's kind of setting it up for that idea that, listen, people need to be ruled in some way or another.
Or else it's anarchy,
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly. And we kind of have an idea that does not go well for us. So
Not really.
So the next chapter that I want to talk about is chapter 2, actually. We're going to jump around a little bit, but this one's actually right afterwards. And it's going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of rule. Pretty straightforward. He says in paragraph 12, in like manner, we must divide. Am I on the right one? Yes. No. Yes, I am. Okay.
I think you are.
In like manner, we must divide just governments. If the government is administered by many, it is given the name common to all forms of government. As for instance, when a group of warriors exercise dominion over a city or province. If it is administered by a few men of virtue, this kind of government is called an aristocracy. I can never get that word.
Aristocracy, I believe.
That's why. Aristocracy.
Yes, yeah.
Noble governments or governance by noble men who, for this reason, are called optimates. And if a government is in the hands of one man alone, he is properly called a king. Wherefore the Lord says by the mouth of Ezekiel, my servant David shall be king over them, and all of them shall have one shepherd. From this, it is certainly shown that the idea of king implies that he be one man who is chief, and that he be a shepherd seeking the common good of the multitude and not his own. Again, we get to this very clear distinction between what Aquinas is saying, what a king should be, a shepherd. Basically, he's using those terms like interchangeably because they should be seeking the common good of the multitude. And we're going to talk a little bit about some instances in history, but we clearly know there's a lot of times where that hasn't been the case. Right. And there have been times where it has. There were some very good kings in the Bible and some really, really, really bad ones in the Bible as well. So pretty straightforward. He's just kind of distinguishing them. He goes on to say, now since man must live in a group because he is not sufficient unto himself to procure the necessities of life, were he to remain in solitary, it follows that a society will be more perfect the more it is sufficient unto itself to procure the necessities of life. There is, to some extent, sufficiency for life in one family of one household, namely insofar as pertains to the natural acts of nourishment and the begetting of offspring and other things of this kind. Self-sufficiency exists, furthermore, in one street, with regard to those things which belong to the trade of one guild. In a city which is the perfect community, it exists with regard to all necessities of life. Still more self-sufficiency is found in a province because the need of fighting together and of mutual help against enemies. Hence, the man ruling a perfect community, a city or province, is automatically called the king. The ruler of the household is called father, not king, although he bears a certain resemblance to the king, for which reason kings are sometimes called the fathers of their peoples. So kind of just explaining that, you have kind of like mini kingdoms and they just get a little bit bigger. You have your neighborhood, you have your family, and then you go out further and you have maybe your whole town, your state, your country, whatever it may be. But that one man is ruling over all of them. So
that's where it starts.
Yeah, exactly. And I always have enjoyed when Aquinas compares this. I think it's probably one of the most profound comparisons and talking about this argument is comparing it to the family.
Yeah. Yes, I think so.
Because it makes the most sense because we know how our families operate.
Yeah, it's kind of equivalent in a way, the family and the government or the city. Yeah.
And of course, we get all of this from God, the way he has set up the church.
Right. Yeah. And the same way that the father is the head of the household, it's this thing that society rejects, which we call patriarchy. No one wants the patriarchy. No one wants it how it traditionally was because again, it's all about the individual. Has this
terrible connotation to it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Random side story. I was in college and I had it was an online class for film, and we had to write a comparison of two movies. And I think we did D-Day and Dunkirk. Okay. Those two war films. Yep. And my partner, it was a group project. Okay, cool. My partner, I think, was a high school student, dual credit student. Okay. And it just cracks me up because I was really stressed because it was towards the end of my college career, so I was really busy. And I just I knew it was not well written, their end of it, let's just put it that way. And I was too busy, and I handed it to my dad and brother to just do a quick edit for me so I could make the adjustments while I was writing the introduction and stuff. And they said, we're really confused, Cecil. I don't know what they're trying to say. And we finally figured out that they accidentally had confused the word patriarchy and patriotism. America has great patriarchy and things like that, and I thought at first, I was like, are they just talking about are they just really wanting to talk about that particular subject, and we're like, no, they just confused. It was very funny. That's funny. It was comical. I'm going to just real quick catch up on some comments. We have Forrest who said hi at the beginning, and Adrian joined. He said he made it. Also, he would like to push the hashtag King Adrian campaign. I guess you don't really campaign if you're going to be a king. I think you just claim it, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, unless it's an elected monarch.
There you go. That's true.
Different.
Yeah. Unless he decides, or if he just is going to get an uprising started or something, start a revolution. He also reminds everybody to like and share. Yes, please do that. That really helps the algorithms of YouTube. And Monica says, hello, Monica. Welcome to the party. Again, Dave Palmer is out. If in case you missed it, he is going to be actually emceeing a big conference in Round Rock, Fullness of Truth, and it's all about spiritual warfare. So,
sweet.
Father Rippinger is going to be there.
Okay,
So he's on his way. He should be listening. He said he was going to try to listen on his way, but he's probably a little bit busy at the moment. But yes, we're talking about monarchy. Anyhow, where were we? Let me get back into my point.
Chapter 2, paragraph 14. Or no, we already read that one.
Okay, we're on to chapter 3, which is this is kind of getting to the real crux of the issue. Whether it is expedient for a province or city to be ruled by one or many. So he's going to talk a little bit about both of these. And again, I would really recommend that you go through and read all of the paragraphs, but for sake of time and not me just reading paragraphs for the entire show, I chose a few that I thought were the most pertinent. So this is from paragraph 17. This question may be considered first from the viewpoint of the purpose of government. The aim of any ruler should be directed towards securing the welfare of that which he undertakes to rule. The duty of the pilot, for instance, is to preserve his ship amidst the perils of the sea. The duty of the pilot, that's the same thing.
And perils, and bring it to...
Oh, there it is. And bring it to unharmed to the port of safety. Now, the welfare and safety of a multitude formed into a society lies in the preservation of its unity, which is called peace. If this is removed, the benefit of social life is lost, and moreover, the multitude in its disagreement becomes a burden to itself. The chief concern of the ruler of a multitude, therefore, is to procure the unity of peace. It is not even legitimate for him to deliberate whether he shall establish peace in the multitude subject to him, just as a physician does not deliberate whether he shall heal the sick man in charge to him. For no one should deliberate about an end which he is obliged to seek, but only about the means to obtain that end. So, does that make sense?
I think so, for the most part. Yeah, it's essentially, I mean, the idea of the combination of peace and unity. It reminds me of the Roman Empire. There was like right before Christ was born, they had the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, and it was essentially when the empire was unified. They had just conquered Egypt, and there was a time when the empire had no war, no conflict, no nothing. It was just peaceful, and that's kind of what the leaders. That's what every leader should be going for, is the unity and the true peace of a nation. And
an entirely different subject that we're really not going to be, oh my gosh, Adrian's still trying to win his leadership, but a completely different topic, but it's an interesting one. I remember I did this in high school again in the Protestant church I was going to. It was all talking about just war about one, because, we talk about peace. If you're just going to conquer land and things, is that something really bringing peace to your kingdom? You know what I mean? Like there's times when, going in and taking over land is a good, that kind of stuff is a really interesting discussion too.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know where exactly I come down that. I mean, war is never a good thing, but the idea that there is a just war, that if you need to defend your country, you definitely can do it. That's completely
different. Yeah, that's the thing. Yes. But there's a lot of kings and monarchs who have like just wanted to conquer, just like, I want more. And it's like, no, what about the people you have?
Yeah, I don't know about all
that. Making them feel secure like that. It would be a whole other discussion, but very interesting. Also, so we do have one person in support of King Adrian, and I'm very disappointed, Nick. No, I'm like, what about King William or Queen Cecil? Let's spread the love. Would you want to be a king, William?
Would I?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I probably not, to be honest. I don't know. That's a lot right there.
That's a lot of responsibility. Yeah. We're just talking about that it's, you are entrusted with people and providing and helping provide their peace.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is a lot of responsibility. All right, anyhow, moving on. Wherefore the apostle, having commended the unity of the faithful, says, "Be ye careful to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. Thus the more efficacious a government is in keeping the unity of peace, the more useful it will be. For we call that more useful which leads more directly to the end. Now it is manifest that what what it itself one can more efficaciously bring about unity than several, just as the most efficacious cause of heat is that which is by its nature hot. Therefore, the rule of one man is more useful than the rule of many. I feel like a little bit in there I got lost personally.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. I mean,
his comparison, I think the first couple times I read this especially was really confusing.
Yeah.
Just as the most efficacious cause of heat is that which is by nature hot. I was like, wait, what do you mean, sir?
Yeah. Yeah.
Therefore, the rule of one man is more useful than the rule of many.
Yeah. I guess it's saying basically that you don't want to, I mean, it's more chaotic when you
don't
have
muddy the
lots
waters.
of different leaders. Yeah.
Well,
harder.
if you have to stop and you know, obviously there are times where you're going to need advice and to do things like, you know, if you think, okay, I think earlier he was kind of making a comparison of like a doctor, you know, he's not going to not help somebody, you know, but doesn't mean that he doesn't go and deliberate with other doctors to make sure they make the best decision. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you know, there are times where you just need to react. Adrian and I were talking this morning on CDT, like if you're flying a plane and you're heading towards a mountain, you're not going to sit, if you're like a first officer, you're not going to be like, Captain, I think we should maybe try to avoid this. What do you think? Like, you know, you're going to avoid the mountain. That's like the most important thing.
Right.
So yeah, there's definitely some simplicity.
Yes, definitely.
For sure. Furthermore, it is evident that several persons could by no means preserve the stability of the community if they totally disagreed. For union, it is necessary among them if they are to rule at all. Several men, for instance, could not pull a ship in one direction unless joined together in some fashion. Now, several are said to be united according as they come closer to being one. So one man rules better than several who come near being one.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing about democracy is it's majority rule. It's essentially, you have 100 senators, 51 say one thing, 50.
So you almost have a 50-50 divide, and half of them are happy and half of them are not.
Exactly.
And they're representing half of the country that's happy and half
I know,
of the
yeah.
country that's not.
That can definitely be an issue depending on the circumstance. And I think we see that a lot in America with Congress and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But rather when you have one man leading a group, I mean, he is obviously going to have to tell you what to do and give you commands, but you're going to go, if you're good and virtuous, you're going to go do that thing and, do what's best for your ship or what's best for your country or your city or whatever. If you have one man there, it makes sense. If you have one man directing people to do something, it's going to be more unifying than many different people who disagree on something, and then the country just kind of collapses from there if it keeps going on like that.
And there's like some really obvious like big differences and differences of opinions that can come from people. Or also just sometimes are a couple of good ways of doing something. There's not always it's not always going to be a black and white option.
Right.
And so sometimes that's when things get really muddy too, when it's just like, well, there's this one good route and there's this other good route.
Yeah.
You're like, which one do we take?
Right.
And then that's when it kind of delays and things can,
it's true.
take a long time. It's interesting though, when he's saying now several are said to be united as according as they come closer to being one. And I don't know. It just made me think about marriage, because you're like, you're coming close to being one and you're leading a family, so
it's true. Yeah.
That's probably why
It's
that
similar.
works.
It's
it
similar.
Can work.
Yeah.
And then he says, again, whatever is in accord with nature is best. For in all things, nature does what is best. Now, every natural governance is a governance by one. In the multitude of bodily members, there is one which is the principal mover, namely the heart. And among the powers of the soul, one power presides as chief, namely the reason. Among bees, there is one king bee, and in the whole universe, there is one God, maker and ruler of all things. And there is a reason for this. Every multitude is derived from unity. Wherefore, if artificial things are an imitation of natural things, and a work of art is a better according as it attains a closer likeness to what it is in its nature, it follows that it's best for a human multitude to be ruled by one person. I thought that was a really beautiful reflection of, we're trying to be closer to our, who we really are, which is sons and daughters of God. And so that's why we reflect these things.
Right, because God
is
the ultimate king, so it's representative of that. What's interesting though is what people will say when I make the claim, people should be ruled by one. When I used to make the claim that people should be ruled by one particular king in a country, they would say I made the claim because God is the ultimate ruler of the universe. He is the king, so we're imitating that. They always bring up the fact that in the Old Testament, God told the people of Israel, I could give you Saul as a king, but you're not going to like it. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like there's like a conflict there. It's like, okay, well, Christ is the ultimate king, and maybe we should imitate that in our society. But then again, God also said, if I give you a king, you're not going to like it. So I'm not sure how you resolve that conflict there. What do you think?
That's a really good question. And I kind of feel like he does. Thomas does kind of touch on this, I think, a little bit, because he talks about the idea that there's going to be dissatisfaction. There's going to be people who are like, oh, why is this person king? Why, and that lack of quote unquote control, over, I mean, you can only control so much really,
right,
even in a democracy, but like that idea of, well, now the people can be really rallied against a king too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it is interesting. I'm trying to remember if I included, I'm starting to remember what I included in this particular PowerPoint versus what I read, because I read a lot.
Okay, yeah.
But I think we're going to touch on that a little bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's an interesting point, because, even God kind of recognized, Adrian says, ultimate king, I heard my name. He's going to try hard. He's going to keep trying.
Oh, yeah.
But one last little bit from
this section.
Is this the last part? I've lost my place.
Paragraph 19. Is that
we have two last little segments.
Two more? Okay.
Excuse me. Again, whatever is in accord with nature is best. Oh, never mind. We already did read this one. This was all about
we
the
did.
nature.
That's right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that's what I knew there was a reason I stayed on this page. Is because something that was kind of cracked me up is he's saying, I've never heard anyone say king bee. Because it's always queen
That's
bee.
really weird.
And it might just be because at that time they didn't know it was a female that was like the leader of the one that if the queen bee leaves, all the bees will leave the hive.
It's true. Yeah.
It's crazy. Every once in a while my YouTube algorithm sends me to bee videos, and I don't know why, but it'll send me like a lady like coming to get bees that are in a place where they really shouldn't be. And just she'll find the queen and take the queen and put them in a new. It's very fascinating.
It's a little random, but
it is. Okay. But then all the bees will follow and go to wherever the new hive is.
Interesting.
Because once they realize, oh no, queen gone, it takes just a few minutes. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Anyhow, sorry. Sissel's side. This is what happens again when Dave is not here. You're just gonna get Sissel's random side tangents about things.
Well, to be fair, when Dave's here, we also go off on side tangents.
You know what?
Too.
That is true, actually. But what is the common denominator? It's you and I. You realize. Okay. Anyhow, last little bit on the chapter 3, where it is expedient for a province or city to be ruled by one man or many. This is paragraph 20. This is also evident from experience, for provinces or cities which are not ruled by one person are torn with dissensions and tossed about without peace. So that complaint seems to be fulfilled, which the Lord uttered through the prophet Jeremiah 12:10. Many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. On the other hand, provinces and cities which are ruled under one king enjoy peace, flourish in justice, and delight in prosperity. Hence the Lord by his prophets promises to his people as a great reward that he will give them one head, and that one prince will be in the midst of them. That's from Ezekiel 34:24 and also Jeremiah 30:21.
Mm-hmm. So he's saying basically it's evident through experience that we know that when provinces or cities are not ruled by one person, they're torn apart without any peace because of like anarchy. Is that kind of what the what the
Yeah,
passage
I
is
think
saying?
that's just what that's kind of what his premise is.
Okay.
And I think he later on he is going to, in some of my later stuff that I put in here, is going to cite a couple of times where that is the case, and he has some things, and I don't know what his statistics he's basing these off of sometimes, just based on his personal reading of history, where he's seen, okay, it seems like more often than not when we're talking about, we're going to kind of change the subject into, he's going to now talk about it from the opposite side a little bit, which I appreciate. And it's the very next chapter 4, is that the dominion of a tyrant is the worst. And literally the first, sentence of this chapter is, just as the government of a king is the best, so the government of the tyrant is the worst. Yeah. It's kind of, you're walking a fine line here. You could either, it's like you're flipping a coin. You're either going to get you can also have like a mediocre, like in between, but you could get the absolute best or the absolute worst.
That's true.
And
Two
it's an interesting
opposites
thing.
of the extreme.
And then you're like, well, what's better, what's worse,
Right.
and we're going to go into that. Thomas has his opinions and arguments about what that, but I'm curious to know, what do you think? What, anyone wants to comment, so please let us know your thoughts. Perry Mason, that's cracking me up. I don't know if that's actually your real name. If it is, that's fantastic. Or if you're just using it because of the TV show about a lawyer. He said, can't do this topic full justice without including Bertrand, I'm not going to try to pronounce all the French names here, and Hans Hermann Hoppe. Democratic lawmakers are not incentivized to preserve, only spend, and use traditional monarchs were. That's a good point. Mm-hmm. Kind of like we were talking about at the beginning, as Thomas was putting it, the purpose of monarchs was to lead them not really necessarily to great prosperity, because we're not talking about physical material things. We're talking about peace and having social lives, but ultimately to their final end, which is God. So I will have to do some more research. That's a pseudonym, but I am a lawyer. Hey, that's great. I like it. Yeah. I love that TV series. I don't know if you've ever watched it before, William, but it's
don't think so, no.
It's worth a watch, I think.
Cool.
From like the 50s and 60s. Nice. But thank you so much, Perry, for joining us. We'll have to look up more into that. And maybe sometime when Dave is back, we can do because again, there's so much more.
There is a lot in this.
We're really only touching on some of the topics here, but we can definitely go back to it. Very, very broad. I feel like this is anytime we do a show for Back to the Father, we're always like, we could do like 5 more of this particular topic.
So true.
I just had to pick and choose some of the best parts of it. But if you have any particular recommendations of readings or writings by either of those, let us know, Perry, so I'd be happy to look into it a little bit more. He goes on in this chapter 4 to say, for democracy stands in contrary opposition to polity. Is it polity?
I say polity, but
polity sounds a lot better.
Polity.
Polity, since both are governments carried on by many persons, as it is clear from what has already been said. While oligarchy is the opposite of aristocracy. I always think of the aristocrats. It's terrible. Aristocracy, since both are governments carried on by a few persons. And kingship is the opposite of tyranny, since both are carried on by one person. Now, as has been shown above, monarchy is the best government. If, therefore, it is the contrary of the best that is worse, it follows that tyranny is the worst kind of government. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Aquinas, for setting that all up for us.
It's essentially saying that there are different, there are 3 different good governments, and then there are 3 separate corruptions of those governments, the bad kind. So I think essentially what he's saying is that the kingship or those different forms of governments are the best kind, and then each of the
have like a folly.
Are tyranny. Like we don't think of in today's society. We always use the term democracy in a positive way. Right. That's not how the Greeks used it. Right. It was a polity for them. The bad kind was the democracy. I think it's kind of ironic for us because we say it like it's a good thing, but the ancient Greeks looked at it as a really bad thing. But in a sense, it kind of makes sense to say democracy, seeing how where our government's going. Right. But it's interesting because you don't really think of democracy like, even if you're going with the Greek definition of democracy, you don't really think of it as a tyranny. But it's interesting because democracy it kind of is a tyranny. It's a tyranny of individuals and the tyranny of a group. It's like
everyone's a king.
Each individual is their own tyrant. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Kind of going back to the beginning when what St. Thomas Aquinas was talking about. And it's also always a little bit more entertaining from an American perspective because we have such a pride in, we got away from the bad king. That's like what we think about, and that's what we pride ourselves on.
Right.
And so that's kind of like the basis of our entire nation.
Right. And I don't know I wonder what St. Thomas Aquinas would say on it. Would he say we have to be loyal to King George III?
That's what I wanted. I wish he had been around to see the American Revolution. I need to know what his thoughts would have been.
He can tell us in heaven.
Yeah, please. That'll be one of the. I feel like I'll have a few questions for a few different people, but that's going to be one of them, I think.
Yes.
All right. It goes on to say, further, a united force is more efficacious in producing its effect than a force which is scattered or divided. Many persons together can pull a load which cannot be pulled by each one taking his part separately and acting individually. Therefore, just as it is more useful for a force operating for a good to be more united in order that it may work good more effectively, so a force operating for evil is more harmful when it is one man when it is divided. Now, the power of one who rules unjustly works to the detriment of the multitude, and that he diverts the common good of the multitude to his own benefit. Therefore, for the same reason that in a just government, the government is better in proportion as the ruling power is one, thus monarchy is better than aristocracy. Every time. Aristocracy. And aristocracy better than polity. Polity. I should have spent hours practicing these words before. Polity. Because you know how sometimes you just know you're saying it wrong in your head and you forget to correct yourself. And then you actually start saying it out loud and you're like, oh man.
And it
polity.
Doesn't sound right.
So the contrary will be true of an unjust government, namely that the ruling power will be more harmful in proportion as it is unitary. Consequently, tyranny is more harmful than oligarchy, and oligarchy more harmful than democracy. Did you follow that?
I followed that for the most part. Yeah,
until Cecil started messing up words.
Yeah, he was just going down the flow essentially.
Do you agree with the premise that I think we can agree with the premise when everyone is being led by one towards good, it's a much more powerful force.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with that.
And then would you agree that the opposite is true? That all being led by one towards an evil or towards something bad is also more powerful, because that's what his premise is.
I think I would, just seeing it from experience in society. It's like the government, if they're going to advocate for this agenda, well, generally people are going to follow their government. So if they're going for something bad, then the people are going to follow them to do that bad thing. Like abortion is just one of many examples.
It is so funny. It is interesting to me, though, the premise he's putting here, that, united towards good, or united towards bad. Yeah. Whether it be with one person, but if it's divided, then it's less powerful.
Right.
So it's kind of like we're on the spectrum. You could have an amazing Catholic king, right, who leads the country beautifully, right? Yeah. On the opposite end, you could have a horrible tyrant who outlaws Catholicism, is making people martyrs, like all sorts of things, right? But in the middle, you could have this kind of like wishy-washy either way, no strong either way, which is where I think a lot of democracy, it's not strongly towards one thing or the other because it's two groups competing against each other,
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, you have the king on one side, the tyrant on the other, and then the democracy like in the middle. Yeah, that it does make sense. It's kind of like, well, what, and I know we'll get into this, but how do you keep those things from going over to tyranny? What is the best means for that? And
it's so funny because the last chapter we're going to talk about, so I got to move quickly here so we actually get to it. I just realized I'm like, the time is going by. I thought I was trying to actually, you know how much I cut out of this thing? There's just so much in this little book. There is a lot, yeah. I don't know what I was thinking, but go quickly back to chapter 4. The next chapter we're going to talk about is how to prevent a monarchy from becoming a tyranny, or what you can possibly contribute / what you do if it does. So moreover, a government becomes unjust by the fact that the ruler, paying no heed to the common good, seeks his own private good. Wherefore, the further he departs from the common good, the more unjust will his government be. But there is a greater departure from the common good in the oligarchy, in which the advantage of a few is sought than in a democracy in which the advantage of many is sought. And there is still a greater departure from the common good in tyranny, where the advantage of only one man is sought. For a large number is closer to totality than a smaller number, and a smaller number than only one. Thus, the government of a tyrant is the most unjust. So basically what it's saying is that because the government of a tyrant is literally just self-serving.
Right.
So that's why it is the worst, because it's not at all, it's doing the exact opposite of what the premise that Aquinas set, what a king is supposed to do, king being a shepherd.
Yes.
Exactly. You're not leading anybody
right,
in
right.
that circumstance. So that's kind of, those are his premises, like, why monarchy good, why anarchy could be the worst thing you could have.
Mm-hmm.
And then this next one is that it is a lesser evil when a monarchy turns into tyranny than when an aristocracy becomes corrupt. Do you agree with that premise?
That's interesting. I don't know, because it's hard because you have two opposite extremes. You have the polity turning into a complete anarchical state. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. And then you have the king you have the risk of a king turning into a total tyrant. So then the question is, so if we had to choose, which one's worse, tyranny or anarchy? I don't know. They're both pretty bad. I would say since I used to be more sympathetic to the kingship idea than the many like democracy idea, I would want to say that anarchy is worse, but I've never experienced it, so I don't know.
Actually done this. Yeah,
I don't know for
it's
sure.
hard to say. I feel like to get a full from a personal standpoint, you'd probably want to experience both, and you could personally decide which one you thought was worse.
Yeah,
maybe for you and your family. But Adrian commented that even a wicked man who is a king tends to do good for his country because self-interest demands that he just not destroy his country, which is fair. He would try to, although sometimes those selfish interests could get to the point where he tries too much of power grab, too much of this, he could destroy his country by being too greedy. That's true. And I think I see the connection to the real world with what you just said. The idea that I think this is the perfect connection. You see President Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping of China. Right. And these are two different leaders of two different very big countries, and I know China treats their people terribly. I mean, it's terrible what they do. I don't know about Russia and to the extent that they do that, but I do somewhat agree with Adrian's point actually, because that is true that Xi Jinping, like, he doesn't stand for like all the LGBT stuff that America stands for. Same with Putin. They don't go. So yeah, we're not going to justify what they do to their people. Sure. But we can see, and it's the same thing with Saudi Arabia. They don't stand for that stuff either. It's like you have but these countries still are for their country. They're for protecting their borders. They're for protecting against their enemies or attacks. So in a way, they still have the interest of the people, even though they may be terrible tyrants. But they still they still look at the goals that will make their country great, because there are certain things like, the LGBT stuff that's just going to tear your country down, but strong leaders won't allow that to happen. So I think there's a comparison to be made there for that, and that's where I'd kind of agree with Adrian's point actually. Yeah, absolutely. And Adrian also followed up with saying the corruption of the best is the worst, but it's less likely for a king to become a complete tyrant than a democracy to become anarchy, which has some truth to it as well. It's not less likely that we're going to go from democracy straight to... Right, that's true. I mean, the king straight to tyrant. He's got to have like some tyrant things in him, I feel like, early on. And that's the thing about... There's two different... I think there's two different kind of monarchies. There's one monarchy where, it's not the great kind of monarchy. Like, you're not setting yourself up great when you have a monarchy or a king who's really, really good, but then his descendants, it goes down and it's worse. Like, that's we're talking even about conservatives would say that's not a cool idea. But what's better is having what we call
an electoral elected monarchy, where the people elect the monarch, but he still acts as the king for the country. But then if he does something bad, he's always checked by the people, and they can have a means to throw him out if he's not serving the common good.
Sense. Yeah, Dave and I talked a little bit briefly this morning. I was able to see him before he left about the idea of, if it's, going by descendants, maybe you have one amazing king who did a really beautiful job of leading a country, but also maybe in that he didn't prioritize his time well. And then some of his kids don't turn out as well. And suddenly the next, you kind of get really bad. You never know. It's always a mixed bag. Yes. Perry also commented that one thing Aquinas may have taken for granted was the limited way monarchy operated in his time. There was no general tax authority. Generally, monarchs and princes lived primarily off their estates, which is another good point. So,
that's true, yeah. It's
different
than how we...
Got to look at it from his perspective.
2 different points, yes.
I am trying to decide if we should... we kind of just discussed the whole about the lesser... Aquinas makes the point, kind of like Adrian is saying, that it's more likely that it's less likely that your monarch is going to go straight to tyrannical, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the point that Aquinas is making in chapter 6. I think I'm going to skip over because I want to make sure we talk to how provision might be made that the king might not fall into tyranny, because I think that's a pretty interesting one.
Yeah. Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. So I think that's slide 21.
Yeah.
So he kind of goes into this because I was curious, like, okay, yeah, how do you stop, a king from becoming very corrupt? Other than, hopefully they'd be a, person of God and they would.
Right. I don't know if it was from this book, but I did read somewhere that the best way a king can prevent himself from becoming a complete tyrant is to, it's really all about, being virtuous and not letting your wealth essentially corrupt you to the point that you're imposing lots of taxes on your people, and it's you're basically King John the First of England again.
Right. Yeah. We don't need to have that again.
Yeah.
So I just a couple snippets from chapter 7. Highly would advise you to go and read on this yourself if you have not. But he says, therefore, since the rule of one man, which is the best, is to be preferred, and since it may happen that it be changed into tyranny, which is the worst, all this is clear from what has been said. I like how he wants to make sure that we know. He's like, I've already basically said this, and I've already proved all these points, but this is what I'm saying now. Mm-hmm. A scheme should be carefully worked out, which would prevent the multitude ruled by a king from falling into the hands of a tyrant. So, William, off the top of your head, how would you stop a whole, kingdom falling into... I use the word kingdom because I just like the word king, but obviously we're talking about monarchy, but like falling into the hands of a tyrant.
You mean like what would I do?
Yeah,
if
like
we
what do you think he might, or what do you think Aquinas might say are some of the steps that you could take?
I'd like to think that he would like the idea of an elected monarchy, the monarch being elected by the people to essentially, and by doing that, you're essentially checked by the people you rule in a way. So it's bringing like the polity a little bit into the democracy, which is what I was saying before the show. Is if we're going to answer the question, is monarchy the best form of government? I would say no. A 100% form of any government is probably not the best idea,
unless you have a perfect ruler, as in God.
Right. Yeah. And the thing that you said about nature as well, I liked that. I think you have to combine a little bit of each. I'm sympathetic to the idea of an elected monarchy being checked by the people, so that they can have a means to, I don't know what it would be, but a means if he went overboard to throw him out and put someone else up. I'd like to think that that's Aquinas' answer, but I'd be interested to, if I'm wrong, to see what Aquinas really says about that.
Yeah. Well, let's find out.
All right.
First, it is necessary that the man who is raised up to be king by those whom it concerns should be of such condition that it is improbable that he should become a tyrant. We were kind of talking a little bit about family environment. If it is going, lineage, is the mom and dad, the king and queen, really raising up their children to be good, rulers? Or are they so distracted themselves that they're not, kind of having the little kingdom of their family.
Right.
Wherefore Daniel, commending the providence of God with respect to the institution of the king, says in 1 Samuel, the king sought a man according to his own heart, and the Lord appointed him to be prince over his people. Then once the king is established, the government of the kingdom must be so arranged that opportunity to tyrannize is removed. At the same time, his power should be so tempered that he cannot easily fall into tyranny. How these things may be done, we must consider in what follows. Finally, provision must be made for facing the situation should the king stray into tyranny. So he's like already got extra plans.
Yeah.
He's ready to go. Indeed, if there be not an excess of tyranny, it is more expedient to tolerate the milder tyranny for a while than by acting against the tyrant to become involved in many perils more grievous than tyranny itself. For it may happen that those who act against the tyrant are unable to prevail, and the tyrant will rage the more. But should one be able to prevail against a tyrant, from this fact itself, very grave dissensions among the people frequently ensue. The multitude may be broken up into factions, either during their revolt against the tyrant or in the process of organization of the government, after the tyrant has been overthrown. Moreover, it sometimes happens that while the multitude is driven out the tyrant by the help of some man, the latter, having received the power, thereupon seizes tyranny. Then, fearing to suffer from another what he did to his predecessor, he oppresses his subjects with an even more grievous slavery.
So is it Aquinas' contention that essentially sometimes it's probably the best idea to leave the tyrant alone and just let him do whatever? Because I'm doing a church history class with my mom as like a theology thing, and one of the things I read in our book is that the early Christians, they accepted the emperors as the leader, as having authority, for the reason that it was only temporal. They weren't going to be tyrants forever,
right?
Because we're only here on this earth for so long.
In reality, most in our little trivia you'll hear in a little bit, it maybe lasted 40, 50 years, sometimes longer than that, like one person's rule.
Yeah. So
it could be that could be most of someone's life.
Yeah.
And it could be a whole generation. You never know.
Yeah.
But the idea being that if he's saying milder tyranny, he's saying if it's not something that's so horrible.
Right.
And then it also talking about the dangers of it could actually be worse if they try to fight back against it and could cause more chaos.
Right. So it's kind of a judgment for the people if they're going to have a revolution. It's kind of like it has to be very, 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 very extreme and like unbearably extreme. And it also, you have to have a game plan essentially that, when you overthrow this tyrant, what kind of government are you going to set up? Is it going to be a good one? And how are we going to do it? Are we going to be a Christian nation, or all these different questions? So yes, definitely, if you're going to do that, you'd have to go in with a game plan. I would say.
Exactly. Well, I mean, like we America left, was able to break away from England.
Yeah.
And then of course, then they're like, what are we doing?
I know.
And that took a little bit of time. Fortunately,
yes.
There wasn't too much chaos in like the people themselves necessarily, but and I kind of skipped down to one of the not really one of the last ones. There's more after this that goes further into this last little paragraph that I'm going to read. If the excess of tyranny is unbearable, some have been of the opinion that it would be an act of virtue for strong men to slay the tyrant and to expose themselves to the danger of death in order to set the multitude free. An example of this occurs even in the Old Testament, for a certain Aoth slew Elgon, the king of Moab, who was oppressing the people of God under harsh slavery, thrusting a dagger into his thigh, and he was made a judge of the people. So again, it's interesting how he says some, kind of going on the idea that it may not be his. He says in further paragraphs to cautionary about taking that action, kind of.
I think
about, because you also have to make sure if you're putting yourself in danger in that way, but you're also, if your heart is not maybe in the right perfect place, that could be a really bad action to take on.
Right.
Your
If
own
you're
soul.
trying to get revenge, it's probably not the best motivation. But yes, I would agree that if it's very unbearable, like in this situation in Judges, then yes.
It's interesting. I think Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
Maybe.
He was, I don't even know how to describe him. He was an author, a theologian, a Protestant theologian, who lived at the time of Hitler.
Okay.
And he was actually involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it's interesting that came up in one of my Sunday school classes years ago, discussing was that a thing you could do without damaging your soul? Kind of, is that something you could be involved with? Obviously, Hitler was a horrible, horrible leader.
Right.
Horrible, horrible person, was responsible for many deaths.
Right.
But, you're kind of like, as a professing Christian, could you go and kill somebody?
I know, it's interesting because it's kind of like what we think today. It seems like in a certain context, it seems like a specific death penalty essentially for the tyrant. It's like, can you justify it under certain circumstances? I mean, maybe. I don't know for sure. I don't want to say
it's one of those things
definitely,
where I don't know if I'd ever want to be in the place to have
position,
to decide.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
If I could avoid that, that'd be great, because that would be a lot of discernment, I feel like, in my brain. Because you're like, if this person was in front of you and you had the opportunity, knowing that.
That's why I like the idea I think personally the best solution is having a system of checks and balances like we have in America. I think America, for the most part, I'm still thinking about it, but for the most part, my recent conclusion has been that we essentially are the best form of government so far because we have checks and balances. We have what I believe, in a way, Aquinas says is the combination of the different forms of government, and we put that together in our government. We have two different houses of Congress, 3 different branches, all of that. That's kind of where I would come down.
It's really funny because Adrian had said that William was basically saying that American system is the perfect government. I was like, I was going to bring that up to you. And he basically just said, at the moment, like, that could be obviously has its problems. You have fallen nature involved in all of these. So that's the biggest problem.
That's the thing.
That's why the only king that has been perfect is God.
Yep.
But that's kind of summing up our topic today. Obviously, we could have gone. I'm actually so sad that we didn't get into some of the things. We might have to talk to Dave about if he'll be willing to branch off with the Summa again in the future to do a part 2, or we'll just have to wait till Dave's out of town again and we'll cover it.
Yes,
if you don't mind, we can do some really quick rapid fire trivia.
Sounds
We
good.
always do trivia at the end of Back to the Father. Usually, Dave is pitting William and I against each other, and I am extremely competitive, so I'm really enjoying this opportunity where I don't have to be the one being competitive. So I just thought I'm going to say some facts about some leaders.
Okay.
Some monarchs. Okay. And they're going to be a lot of them are, not going to lie, a lot of them are British, because I didn't realize I was looking at basically a British list at one point, but I try to add some other ones in there too. So I'm just going to give you a little hint, and you just say who you think it is, and you're playing versus the audience. Of course, we have a delay, so the audience is going to comment much later, but I'll still let them have points as well.
Okay.
All right. He had 6 wives.
Oh, King Henry VIII.
Yeah. Good job. Some of them, I'm going to be honest, most of these are pretty easy, but he defeated the Norman forces at the Battle of Hastings, forever changing the history of England. This one was a slightly harder one. Slightly. But I'm still believing you.
King William the... I don't remember what his last name was. But.
Well, he's got more like a title.
Oh, King William the Conqueror?
Yeah, there you go. I mean, she has a last name too, but that's kind of like what I was going for. Yes. So I was like, if you don't get William, that's going to be really sad. Okay. Yeah. Until recently, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history.
Oh, this is the queen who recently died, right? Queen Elizabeth. No?
Is it? Until recently, she had been the longest reigning monarch in British history, but she was passed by maybe that one who just died recently.
Is it Queen Elizabeth?
Nope.
No.
Another famous female queen from England.
Queen Mary?
Nope.
No. I don't know if I know
Queen
this one.
Victoria. So before Queen Elizabeth II passed her in how many lives?
Gotcha.
So I think hers was like 60 something years.
Okay.
She was the sovereign of 32 independent countries during her lifetime and died just recently.
What is her name? Queen Elizabeth II?
Queen Elizabeth II.
Second.
Yep. Okay. And she reigned for over 70 years. He had a short reign, dying in the Battle of Bosworth, but still managed to be the subject of a Shakespeare play.
King James?
That is a Shakespeare play, but not the one I'm thinking of.
Okay. King Richard,
Which one?
the third.
Yes, there you go. He technically wrote one about the second as well.
Okay, yeah.
But the third is, I think, the more popular one.
Yeah.
She financed Christopher Columbus's journey to find the new land.
It was a Queen of Spain.
Yep,
I know.
yep.
I know this one. I'm just blanking on it.
It's okay.
Isabella.
Isabella.
Yep,
Yeah. Isabella the First. Yep, absolutely. Also, Adrian thought King Lear, which is a good guess, but also the wrong one for the previous one.
Yeah.
Referred to as the Sun King, this monarch held the longest reign in European history.
I don't know why I thought for a second we were going over to ancient Egypt.
Yeah,
but
I don't think I didn't go quite that far back. I'm not gonna lie.
So this is in English.
This is actually a French.
Oh, French. Okay.
Sorry, I had to actually think about that for a second. I was like, wait, I'm pretty sure this is a French.
And what was the question again?
This monarch held the longest reign in European history, and he's referred to as the Sun King. This is one of the harder ones. I don't think this one.
Oh, wait. King Louis the 14th.
The fourth.
The fourth.
Very close.
Okay,
I will take it.
Yeah.
Let me see what we're doing. Adrian thought Charlemagne. I almost put through a Charlemagne one in here, but I didn't. Through successful wars, he expanded the Russian Empire and shaped modern Russia.
I think I was reading about this for one of my classes recently. I can't remember. Ivan the Terrible?
No.
No. Okay.
Think of a more positive name. And our first pope.
Oh. Well, Peter, obviously. I don't.
Peter the Great.
Peter the Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last Russian emperor who was overthrown in 1917.
Oh. He's a canonized saint or blessed, right?
Not this one.
Not this one.
No,
okay.
this is the one whose entire family was killed. And there's a very famous this one princess, his daughter might have still been alive. If you've heard of that, Anastasia, right?
I think so. Yeah. I think I know.
I think Adrian got this one.
Okay.
Yeah, Nicholas III.
Yes. Yeah.
Tsar Nicholas III.
Yes.
And lastly, he married Princess Zita and is beatified in the Catholic Church.
Is this the one I was
Yes.
referring to? Okay. That was wasn't this also a Nicholas?
No.
Or am I mixing it up?
You're missing it, but it's okay. I also could see that easily.
Okay.
It is Carl.
Carl,
Blessed
yes,
Carl.
yes, that's right. Okay.
Well, Charles is like full name, but everyone calls him Carl.
Okay. I think I keep getting Nicholas and Carl mixed up. Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
Good job. And Adrian got that one as well. So we'll give that one a point. Good job.
There we go.
William, though. Thank you all so much for joining us today as another student takeover. Hopefully we held it down the floor enough for Dave while he's been gone.
I think so. Yeah.
As long as you don't send any massive letters of complaint, I think we'll be golden.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't say anything too controversial.
We'll still have jobs next week, is my goal. But Dave should be back next week, and we'll see. If you ever have a particular subject about the Summa or about St. Thomas Aquinas philosophy that you want us to cover in the future, please feel free to email us backtothefather@grnonline.com. That's backtothefather@grnonline.com. I had to think about that a second. But thank you all again so much for joining us. Lord willing, we'll be back next week at the same time, 1 o'clock Central. Oh, and can you turn up the production computer? I just realized I turned it down. There we go. Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much, William. We will see you again very soon. But thank you for watching.
Thanks for joining us for Back to the Father. And don't forget, the glory of God is the human person fully alive. If you have comments about the show, email Dave Palmer at grnonline.com.